Welcome to a time when the clanking of armor was as common as the cawing of crows. But a knight's shine wasn't just from his sword. Today, we're prying open the visor on the not-so-sparkling world of knightly cleanliness.
Or the lack thereof, Leo. I mean, did these ironclad warriors ever hear of a little thing called soap?
You'd be surprised, Dane, but first, let's welcome our gallant guest, Sir Scrub-a-lot, who claims that a true knight fights grime as fiercely as dragons.
Indeed, Leo. In my quest for cleanliness, I've jousted with more dirt than dastardly villains.
Join us as we delve into the stench of chivalry, hygiene habits of medieval knights. Let's armor up and charge in. Chivalry may have championed the noble cause, but under the clanking armor of a medieval knight lurked a less gallant truth: the quest for cleanliness. Clad in steel, these knights were symbols of valor, yet the struggle against sweat and dirt was an enemy no sword could cleave.
You're telling me that behind every heroic tale was a knight in not-so-shining armor smelling like a week-old banquet?
Indeed, Master Dane. Armor like the chainmail hauberk was a fortress against foes, but a prison for pests. Beneath those iron rings, a knight's skin waged its own war with the foul fiends of filth.
Let's set the stage: the Middle Ages, a time of fortresses and feudalism. Our knight has just returned from a campaign. His armor tarnished, not just by the blood of his enemies, but by the sweat and grime of battle. To the modern nose, the scent would be, well, let's say, less than noble.
Less noble and more peasantly, I'd wager. So how did our chivalrous friends manage the muck?
And you see, maintaining one's cleanliness was as crucial as maintaining one's honor. After removing his armor, piece by heavy piece, a knight would first scrape off the worst of the grime with a knife. Yes, a knife. The tool for eating and fighting now served a new purpose.
Her knife for cleanliness. That's cutting through the dirt, quite literally. But surely that wasn't enough to ward off the stench of battle.
A fair point, Sir Leo. Post-scraping, the knight would then proceed to dry bathe, using cloths and powders to dab away the sweat and soil. Water was scarce, and full immersion was thought to weaken the body, inviting disease. A knight's bath was a dry affair.
Dry bathing? That's like trying to clean dishes without water. I suppose they had their reasons, but it sounds like a recipe for a rather pungent potpourri of person.
Indeed, and that's where the Squire came in, armed with fresh linens and a sturdy brush. It was a daily duel with dirt, one that required diligence and a strong stomach.
And so the knight would emerge, not exactly fresh as a daisy, but certainly less offensive to the olfactory senses. Yet, this was just the beginning of the hygiene routine, wasn't it?
Just so. The true test came with the care of the armor itself. Left unattended, the knight's steel skin could rust and rot, much like the knight within if neglected. It was a meticulous process involving sand, vinegar, and a lot of elbow grease. Rust was the enemy of mobility, and a knight encased in seizing joints was no more useful than a scarecrow in a duel.
A knight's armor was his second skin, a barrier against the harsh realities of medieval warfare. But with no zippers or buttons in sight, one must wonder how our noble warriors answered nature's call.
Yes, let's talk about the knight's roundtable meeting. I can't imagine a quick dash to the privy was all that simple.
The call of the wild was indeed a challenge. The design of most armor provided, let's say, strategic gaps for such necessities. But privacy was a luxury. Often, nature's call was answered swiftly and without ceremony.
So, while the tales regale us with jousts and banquets, they conveniently omit the less romantic realities. Knights, it seems, were much like us, subject to the same calls of duty, both on the battlefield and off.
True, Sir Leo, but a knight's resourcefulness was as keen as his sword. For instance, leather undergarments served as a layer of protection, not just from the chafing of metal, but from the elements themselves.
Leather in the heat of battle, that must have been quite the aromatic experience.
Indeed, the combination of leather, sweat, and the absence of a regular wash could create an unforgettable ambiance. But fear not, For the knights had their secrets, herbs and flowers tucked within their armor to fend off the smell.
An early form of air freshener, then? Fascinating how ingenuity blooms even in the direst of circumstances. But what of their hands and faces, the only parts exposed to the elements, and the scrutiny of their peers?
Ah, the visage and the gauntlets were indeed scrubbed with more care. A knight's face was his banner, his hands, his tools. Cleanliness in these respects was not just for vanity, but for health. Without the protection of steel, these parts were washed with water, albeit sparingly.
A splash of water for the hands and face, but the rest left to the mercy of dry cleaning. It's a wonder these knights didn't rustle like parchment with all that powder.
A fair jest, Sir Dane, but remember, these rituals of cleanliness were not merely for comfort. They were a matter of survival. A knight encumbered by filth and infection was no knight at all.
A battle on all fronts, then. Against the enemy, against rust, and against the relentless tide of their own human condition. Truly, the life of a knight was one of constant vigilance. Now let's turn to the unsung heroes of hygiene, the squires. Tasked with the maintenance of the knight's armor, and yes, their cleanliness, these apprentices were pivotal in the upkeep of chivalry's sheen.
So you're saying the squire was part knight's aide? Part medieval janitor?
Precisely, young Squire Dane. The squire's duties were as varied as the stars, from lacing up the chausses to ensuring the greaves gleamed. But perhaps the most crucial was the cleansing of the knight after the fray.
A squire's day began long before the crowing of the cockerel, heating water for the knight's morning ablutions. While knights did not bathe often, the squire ensured that when they did, it was a ritual of rejuvenation.
Sounds like a demanding job. What else did these squires do?
Beyond the basin and soap, squires were keepers of the privies, ensuring that even a knight's most private moments were met with dignity. They carried portable toilets on campaigns, a luxury in the wilderness of war.
Portable privies, the medieval precursor to the modern-day loo, I presume.
Indeed, and maintaining these was no trifling task. After all, the health of the camp could hinge on the cleanliness of its latrines.
So, managing muck and mire was a matter of morale and mortality. A squire's work was never done.
And let us not forget, the squire was also an apprentice, learning the ways of war and chivalry. Amidst all their scrubbing and scouring, they trained for the day they would don their own armor.
From scrubbing pots to swinging swords, the life of a squire was one of service and ambition. Their contribution to the knight's legacy was more than just polish. It was foundational to the very ideals of knighthood.
It gives cleaning up one's act a whole new meaning. But what about their own hygiene? Did squires practice what they preached?
A squire's cleanliness was a reflection of their master's standards. While they had more opportunities for washing, they too faced the limitations of medieval life. A clean squire was a sign of a well-run household.
A knight in shining armor and his squire, both gleaming beacons of cleanliness and order. It paints quite the picture. But what happens when water is scarce and the dirt of battle clings like a shadow?
Resourcefulness, Sir Leo. From sand for scouring to vinegar for vanquishing vermin, squires found ways to keep both knight and armor spotless.
I'm starting to think these squires were the real heroes of the age. Without them, the chivalrous knight would be but a grimy ghost of legend.
Well said, Dane. The squire's role was indispensable, a blend of servant, student, and stalwart companion. They were the backbone of the knight's everyday life. Venturing further into the hygiene habits of yore, let's plunge into the medieval approach to bathing. For knights, the art of cleanliness was both a practicality and a rare privilege, wasn't it, Sir Scrub-a-Lot?
Indeed, Sir Leo. While bathing was an occasional luxury, it was a necessity after a grueling bout of battle or joust. Immersing oneself in water was believed to open the pores and invite illness, so full baths were infrequent.
You're telling me that a knight's nightly bath was more like a quarterly bath.
Perhaps that's an overstatement, but let's consider the logistics of bathing. Bathhouses were common in some locales, offering steam and solace. Yet, in the field, a knight's bath was often nothing more than a brisk rub-down with a wet cloth.
And for the most intimate of cleanings, privacy was key. In the confines of castle walls, privy chambers were equipped with wooden seats over pits or streams. It was a time for contemplation and, of course, cleanliness.
So, a knight might spend his morning training for combat and his evening perched above a stream. How quaint.
Indeed, Master Dane. But let us not forget the innovations of the time. The garderobe, a room dedicated to such private matters, was often placed far from the living quarters, yet it served a dual purpose.
A dual purpose, you say? Do tell, Sir Scrub-a-Lot.
Well, the waste did not go to waste, so to speak. It often fell into the moat, deterring invaders, or was collected as fertilizer. Efficiency in all things, even in the disposal of byproducts.
That's one way to ensure your defenses are potent. But back to the matter of bathing. How did they manage without the soaps and shampoos we take for granted?
Ah, the alchemy of hygiene. Ash and fat would combine to create soap, though it was a luxury. More common were fine sands and oils, scrubbed into the skin to cleanse and then scraped away, taking the day's grime with them.
A gritty solution to a dirty problem. But what of the hair? A knight's flowing locks couldn't be neglected.
True, Sir Leo. When water was used, it was often in small basins, enough to wet and rinse the hair. Combs were common, crafted from bone or wood, to keep one's mane free of lice and knots.
So no lather, rinse, repeat, just comb, oil and scrape. Knights really had to rough it, huh?
Indeed. But remember, to a knight these rituals were as much a part of their armor as the steel itself. Cleanliness was next to godliness, even if that cleanliness didn't quite match our modern standards.
From the steamy recesses of the bathhouse to the private garderobe, it seems our medieval forebears had their own ways of staying clean, some more aromatic than others.
Well, I'll never look at a moat the same way again, but it's clear that behind the armor, there was a lot of effort to keep up appearances and hygiene.
Effort and innovation indeed. That wraps up our segment on medieval cleansing. Next, we'll explore the scents that shielded the knights from their own less than fragrant realities. The battlefield was not just a test of mettle, but a trial for the nostrils. Yet our gallant warriors had their own aromatic secrets. Isn't that so, Sir Scrub-a-Lot?
Indeed, Sir Leo. The stench of chivalry was oft masked with an array of perfumes and powders. A knight's olfactory offense was parried with scented oils derived from herbs, flowers, and even musk.
So, a knight might smell like a walking herb garden in full bloom? Interesting strategy.
More than a mere strategy, Dane, it was a necessity. The sense of smell is a powerful memory trigger, and a pleasant aroma was preferential to the alternative. Knights would anoint themselves with oils before donning their armor, a practice that also protected the skin from chafing.
The concoction of scents was a personal signature. Lavender for one knight, rosemary for another, each fragrance a whisper of the man beneath the metal.
And let's not forget the ladies of the court, whose favor a knight would wear into battle. I imagine a scented kerchief was far preferable to a sweaty gauntlet.
Quite right, young Dane. Such tokens were cherished, and the scent they bore served as a reminder of the knight's duty and devotion. The power of perfume cannot be understated in a world dominated by the odor of reality.
It seems our knights were versed in the art of olfactory disguise. But what of their gear? Did their horses and equipment receive the same fragrant attention?
Indeed, the maintenance of one's mount and materiel was a reflection of the knight's stature. A well-groomed steed was as important as the polish on one's shield. Oils and ointments kept leather supple and prevented the wood from splintering.
From greaves to geldings, everything had its place and polish. It's impressive the lengths they went to maintain such standards.
And let's not overlook the gatherings at court. A knight would adorn his lady's hair with flowers, turning the dance floor into a cavalcade of perfumes, each couple a testament to the era's love of fragrance.
Indeed, the ballroom was a battlefield of bouquets, where the sharp tang of metal was replaced by the soft sighs of petals.
A gentler form of combat, with no less strategy involved. A well-chosen scent could be as compelling as a well-wielded sword.
That brings us to the end of our aromatic adventure. It's clear that while medieval knights might have battled with blood and dirt, they also waged a subtler war against odors, with their arsenal of scents.
From the guardrobe to the Great Hall, it's a fragrant history that's been, until now, tucked away beneath layers of steel and story.
Indeed, Dane, and with that, we've uncovered the aromatic armor of the knights of old. Thank you, Sir Scrubberlot, for guiding us through this scented saga of chivalry.
It was my honor and pleasure, noble hosts. Remember, a knight's tale is not just about the clang of swords, but also the whisper of silk and the bouquet of cleanliness.
Well, it seems chivalry had its unsung challenges, from rusty armor to rusty knights.
Indeed, Leo, a knight's battle was as much with his own scent as with any foe.
I'll stick to modern plumbing, thanks. But hey, don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed our historical plunge into knightly bots.
And share with all your fellows, squires and damsels. Subscribe for more dives into the quirkier side of history, and drop a comment on what historical hygiene habits you want us to explore next. Until next time, stay fresh, history buffs.